welcome you all to Trek Wars. The Klingon Defense Force added the powerful Vor'cha-Class attack cruiser in their fleet in the late half of the 24th century. This new, more advanced class of warship was designed to replace the aging Katanga-class battlecruiser that entered service nearly 100 years earlier in the 2270s. At 481 meters in length, the Vor'cha-Class was more than 130 meters longer than its predecessor and could accommodate a crew numbering as many as 1,900 personnel. The overall design of the Vor'cha-Class was very recognizable as it incorporated the same basic shapes and early Klingon ships such as the D-7 and the Katanga-class battlecruiser. Like them, the bridge module at the front was separated from the main body by a large neck that flared out into wings, which contained the warp nacelles. Although the Vor'cha-Class was more of a unmistakable Klingon design, it differed from their earlier classes of the ship in several ways. The most obvious difference was a much flatter front head section. This contained a forked nose featuring the ship's primary disruptor cannon, an enormously powerful weapon that was capable of firing solid or intermittent disruptor beams. Other differences included a much thicker connecting neck between the front bridge module and main body, while there was also much more surface detail all over the hull, with heavily armed plated plates and had radiation blocks clearly visible. Some of the really interesting features about the Vor'cha-class cruiser is the fact that the ship has been implemented with Federation technology. Now, this Federation technology is best seen when you're looking at the warp nacelles. Now, when you look at the Vor'cha-class warp nacelles, you'll see that they have some similar characteristics that the Federation counterpart Galaxy. The Bussard collectors are the prime example. As you can see, they have a very open face, just like the Galaxy class, which allows for greater performance. So this ship is similar in speed and maneuverability as a Galaxy class at warp speeds. A lasting period of peace between the Federation and the Klingon Empire following the Kittelmeer Accord of 2293 saw the sharing of technologies. This ultimately led to some of the aspects of Starfleet ships' designs translating into the hardware used in the construction of the Vor'cha-class cruiser. This was most notable in the look and shape of the cannon warp nacelles that featured the Bussard collectors on the front of them. The hull of the Vor'cha-class was the first color of a much lighter green than the gritty dark green of the Beryl-class bird of prey that was in service at the same time. This changed in the mid-2370s as more Vor'cha-class cruisers entered active duty. Their color reverted into a dark green seen on other classes of Klingon ships. So there is actually also an in-canon explanation for the different color. So the ships that you're seeing that look and have this light colored green, these classes of ships, when the ships were first being constructed, the Vor'cha-class cruisers were not given out to very many houses. There were only the great houses, and only the leaders of the great houses were able to own or operate any of these ships. Now, one of these ships was also the flagship for the Klingon Empire that the Chancellor would use to do negotiations with great powers like the Federation. So these particular ships are the first generation of these ship class, and they're actually superior than the ships that are mass-produced later on. As the ship goes into mass production, they do have a downgraded variant. So this variant is just as fast as a Federation Galaxy class. This ship's armament is amazing. The ship's shields are equivalent to a Galaxy class, but those things are all pretty much the same in the other variant as well. What is actually different is the internal sensor systems aboard this ship are more in line with Federation designs and technology. But because it's harder for Klingons to produce sensor systems of that caliber, they didn't implement it. It was more of a priced reason. They didn't think it was as necessary. So you'll hear variants talk about some of the limitations of the Vor'cha-Class cruiser and how its sensor systems are inadequate compared to its Federation counterparts. What they're actually stating to you is not this particular variant. This variant is very much in line with Federation technology. This is one of the most advanced starships that was out in the galaxy at the time. This ship is using Galaxy-class technology, and it's integrated into Klingon tech. Now, the Vor'cha-Class cruisers that we see, the dark green variants, are a mass-produced military version. They have the same weapons, the same torpedoes, the same shields, the same engines. The really only difference is they had removed some of the more advanced sensory systems because they wanted to be able to mass produce the system. And it was more of a cost-effective situation. All right, so now we have a basic understanding. I want to kind of talk about the role of the Vor'cha-Class cruiser. So it is a heavy combat ship that was designed to take on planetary structures as well as push frontline. The ship also is the command center for a Klingon fleet. So a commanding officer is going to be aboard the Vor'cha-Class cruiser and is going to direct all the other Klingon ships what to attack, where to engage, and what to do. One of the things that's really unique about the Vor'cha-Class weaponry is that it does have that incredibly powerful siege phaser in the front, which is they refer to as a heavy disruptor. It is capable of delivering enough damage to destroy a lot of installations, space stations, or ships. The other part about the ship is that the ship carries 18 disruptors, and those 18 disruptors are located all around the ship. Unlike a lot of Klingon designs like the Katanga and the Bird of Prey, which has no firing arcs behind it, those limitations have been removed. There is nowhere that you can attack a Vor'cha-Class cruiser that it can't fire at you. It's got 18 disruptors located, and it's got 360-degree firing arcs. Its weaponry payload is 1 heavy disruptor, 18 disruptors, and 3 photon torpedo tubes. So the ship is able to deliver an enormous amount of firepower for a ship of its class and size. So the ship is actually a cruiser, but it has enough firepower and weaponry to be called a battleship. Now, the Vor'cha-Class primary weapon is a heavy disruptor located between the 2 little pinchers. So the little pinchers are torpedo launchers. In the middle is the heavy spiral wave disruptor cannon. The heavy spiral wave disruptor cannon of the Klingon Empire is one of the strongest weapons in the major empires. So it's capable of firing a blast of 520,000, but its normal operational firing arc is 357,500. It can fire that 357,500 up to 4 times. So that's 1,430,000. To give you guys an idea, that's enough firepower to destroy a Galaxy-class starship if its shields were down. And it's also enough firepower to collapse a Federation Galaxy-class shields, possibly, because the amount of firepower that's hitting a ship is so enormous, it might be able to knock the shields out before the rest of the shields can compensate. That's the primary weapon of this ship. It's designed to attack extremely powerful shielded objects and bring them down in a relatively short amount of time. Alright, so let's kind of talk about the multi-shot torpedo tube systems that they're using. So I'm not exactly sure how many torpedoes the Vor'cha-Class cruiser can actually shoot. We know for a fact that Klingon multi-shot torpedoes existed on the Katanga, so we know at minimum they're going to be firing at least 3 photon torpedo tube or 3 photon torpedoes, and we have seen Klingon birds of prey fire up to 5 times. Okay, so the Vor'cha-Class cruiser has standardly 3 photon torpedo tubes. The mass-produced variant, an additional photon torpedo is given to it, and it has up to 4. 2 front and 2 back. So that means it has 1,026,000. So we know that Klingons can fire at minimum 3 times with their multi-shot torpedo technology, so there's a high likelihood that it's just using standard Klingon tech, but it is possible could be higher than that. We don't exactly know, and I'm not 100% sure, so this is a rough estimate. Okay, and the standard disruptors that you're going to see aboard a ship of this class is 32,500, so the interesting thing is, well, where does that stand up against Federation-class starships? So let's kind of look. So you have Type 8, Type 9, we have 13,750, we have 20,000 for Type 9, and then Type 10 is 65,000. So basically, Klingon weapons are in a high-grade level. They are not as good as Type 10 phasers, but they're not as bad as Type 9. They're in this kind of gray middle area. So I would say that they are a high mid-tier weapon. So they are better than most of the other powers out there, but they're not as good as what you would see on more advanced Federation starships like the Nebula, the Galaxy, USS Defiant, and things of that nature. Alright, so the actual full power of a disruptor is only part of its strength. So how many times can one of these disruptors fire? So for the Vor'cha-Class cruiser, it is up to 16 times. So that's 520,000 points of damage. That's a significant amount of firepower. So each one of these disruptors is putting out 520,000 points of damage. If you're kind of curious of how much that is and the power scale to get an idea, that means one Klingon barrage from its standard disruptors could destroy a Jem'Hadar fighter. So, is it the best? No. Is it good? Yes. And so those are KGDM-3s. So those are the most common disruptors seen aboard all Klingon ships. Okay, so let's kind of talk about Klingon disruptors. Now, there is something unique about the Klingon disruptors that the Vor'cha-Class cruiser is using. They are different from the disruptor cannons that you're seeing aboard the Burrell and then the K-Vork. Those are short-range disruptors. The Vor'cha-Class cruisers can either fire those bolts, which are superior, or it can fire them in a beam format, which is for long range. So it can go and attack targets from extreme range with its torpedoes. It can attack things from long range with its disruptors. And then it can also attack things in close range by modulating and making them more bolt-sized disruptors. Now, the difference is the further the beam, the less intense the firepower is going to be. So Klingon ships still want to get as close as possible to get as much firepower as possible out of their disruptors. Alright, so now let's talk about the defenses of this ship. So first off, its hull strength is 860,769, an armor rating of 0.34. So that's pretty good armor, and the hull strength is good. Now, it's not as good as a Galaxy-class starship, but for a ship of its weight and class, it's extremely well armored. Alright, so we take a look at the ship. You see the armor rating is obviously that 0.34, and it's got a mass of 2,238,000. So that means this ship is half the weight of a Galaxy-class starship, yet it's still in the same weight class. Now, the reason I say that is it can take as much damage as a Galaxy-class. Very similar. There's only a few 100-point difference. And that is not that much when you think about the weight difference. So the armor rating of this starship is significantly better than a Galaxy-class starship. Now, to give us an understanding, a Galaxy-class starship, a standard Galaxy-class starship, is 1,040,000. Their armor rating is 0.23. So go ahead and keep that number in your head, and then let's take a look at the two together. All right, so as you can see, like I said, there's only a few 100-point difference. We have 50% less mass, but yet we have almost the same amount of damage the ship can take. So the armor rating is 0.34 versus 0.23. So we can see that when it comes to armor, and this makes sense, because the Vor'cha-Class cruiser is a combat starship. The Galaxy-class starship is combat-oriented, but its main goal is long-range exploration. So these are two different ships with two different ideas. but they're using similar technology in different ways. Okay, so let's kind of think about this. Let's kind of put the shields aside for the moment, and let's just think about the hull and then the size and the 11-point difference. So the Vor'cha-Class cruiser has got more armor. It's also got subsystems that are going into those weapon pods to keep them functioning. So there's multiple relays so that the power doesn't go out with those weapons. Federation Galaxy-class starships, phaser arrays are similar technology. So like I said, there's a lot of similar technology between the two. When it comes to overall just firepower, the Enterprise has the advantage. It's got almost twice the firepower when it comes to its weaponry. The only offset is the fact that there's 14 modules on the Enterprise, Type 10 phasers. There's 18 on the Vor'cha-Class cruiser. So in long, drawn-out fights with multiple ships, your Vor'cha-Class cruiser is probably going to be the more effective in long-term combat. And the reason for that is on a one-on-one, it's probably going to lose to the Galaxy-class. But the Galaxy-class can't stay operational as long as the Vor'cha-Class cruiser can. And it can do that because of it's got several more weapon pods, as well as its ability to withstand damage is almost the same. It's more compact. So you're going to be seeing less damage. It's going to be eroding the armor that's on the ship, while the Galaxy class is taking that to the infrastructure. It's just taking, that blunt damage. Now, am I saying the Galaxy class is weak? Absolutely not. That's a fantastically strong ship for its class. It's a great starship. It's just the Klingon ship was built for combat. And that's something you got to take in consideration. It's built for combat, and it's using Galaxy-class technology. Now, are they all, completely the same? Probably not. And we do see some distinction between the shields. Okay, so we look at the shields. There's two possibilities that I have for the Vor'cha-Class cruiser. So my standard is 1,690,000. That's 50 shots from a K-Vort and one photon torpedo. Now, I do have the possibility that I was off the calculations, and so it could be as high as 1,798,000. Now, we look at the Galaxy-class starship. We know for a fact the Galaxy-class starship shields are 1,755,000. And we know that they are Dominion variants. Their shielding has been increased to 1,950,000. So we'll just go with the top two. So 1,690,000 versus 1,755,000. They are so close that I really think that they're the same shield technology. It's just Federation technology maybe doesn't work with Klingon technology as perfect, so it's slightly off. That's where I'm getting this. I'm pretty sure that they're using the same kind of shield system because, remember, the Vor'cha-Class cruiser is definitely Federation technology. A vast majority of the ship's internal systems, sensors, the engines, impulse engines are more advanced Federation technology. Because remember, the Klingons are not as advanced as the Federation, especially during TNG era. Now, with that being said, I do have some things that I don't know for sure about. So we do see the Vor'cha-Class cruiser fight a lot in the Dominion War, but we don't really get a good overall reading of what the mass-produced version shields are, so I'm only guessing that they're the same. So if you ever get time and you want to check out some of these cool images, Trek Yards, this image belongs to them and their artists and teams, and I just kind of took it. I want to give them credit for it, but I want to show this is the best example of the size comparison. So I added these little marks on there so you can see the Galaxy is 4,500,000, and then obviously the mass is 2,238,000 for the Vor'cha-Class cruiser. Now, the Galaxy class can hold up to 10,000 people, and then as you can see, it's 1,900 for the Vor'cha-Class cruiser. So the Vor'cha-Class cruiser, and the reason for that, it doesn't have the internal frame that the Galaxy class is just absolutely phenomenally large. I mean, if you look at it from the top, I mean, it just absolutely blows the ship up. You could almost fit that ship in the saucer section alone when it comes to actual pure just radius. Yeah, Galaxy class is just huge. So one of the advantages, obviously, of the Galaxy class is its size, its amount of crew, supplies it can, take on. I don't think the Vor'cha-Class cruiser is really good at really long range missions. I mean, for the Klingons, it's good, but overall, that's quite a bit of crew for a ship that really isn't that big when you actually look at the diameters of how it goes, because it's a pretty thin ship. But for a ship of its size, it is absolutely a beast. All right, so I kind of want to talk about one of the primary reasons why they designed this ship is troop transport. There really wasn't that much for the Klingons to use, especially during the TNG era, so they definitely needed something that can carry lots of troops, and they can fit quite a few troops aboard these starships. So they're a lot smaller than some of the Capital class ships and some of the other empires. They have the firepower, they have the shielding, they have the speed, they have cloaking devices. You know, this is a spectacular ship for what you're getting. I mean, it's small, it's maneuverable, it's heavily armed, it's got defenses, it can carry a large amount of troops for a ship of its size. This is a fantastic design for conquering other empires. So my overall assessment of the Vor'cha-Class cruiser is that it is fantastic. You've got a large ship, it's got a cloaking device, it's fast, it's maneuverable, it has incredible armor for a ship of its size, it has unbelievable amounts of firepower for a ship of its size, and it was able to be produced in a mass production volumes. Now, as far as the variants go, I personally don't think there's much of an issue with them going with like mediocre sensor systems. I just don't think the Klingons really need really powerful deep sensor systems. They're not mapping space. They don't really give a crap about any of that. So I completely agree with some of the other books and some of the other manuals that talk about how they do not have Federation advanced sensory systems. Now, when I say that, I am not talking about targeting systems. They did not use mediocre targeting systems. We are talking about deep space scanners like the Galaxy class, Voyager, things of that nature. Overall, this ship is probably the best starship out there. For your size, for the troops, for the amount of firepower that you get, and the amount of time it takes to produce, this is the best ship out of the Alpha Quadrant.